I'm going to demonstrate covering the boards for the square back case binding. I have my front board, my spine piece, and my back board. So I'm going to start there. I have a piece of book cloth that is 4.5 inches by 12 inches. And I'm going to start by taking the spine piece and gluing it up. And placing it in the center of the book. So I've placed that in the approximate center of the book cloth. I'm trying to get as close as I can, but not worrying about it too much. Next step is to take one board and line it up. And what I want to do is to line this up and have, I'm going to glue it and put 3 board thicknesses between. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my 3 board thickness. So 3 board thicknesses, 3 board thicknesses, 3 board thicknesses, 3 board thicknesses. Okay. I'm going to take, before I glue on the boards, I need to make sure that this is perfectly centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut that down to 1 3/4 inches, just so that it's centered. So 1 3/4 here, 1 3/4 here, 1 3/4 here, and 1 3/4 there. I'm going to go ahead and cut both of those. And this is one of those cases where I want to keep my ruler in place until I'm cut all the way through. Okay. And I'm doing the same thing on both sides. And I'm going to use a piece of waste paper. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to just take a pencil and mark where I'm going to be putting my boards at the top and the bottom. My waste paper. And I'm going to glue this side. So I'm 3 board thicknesses away from my spine piece. Have that glued. Set my waste paper aside and place 1 board on, 3 board thicknesses away from my spine piece. Just going to make sure that I'm aligned there. Just a little bit. Okay. And turn that over. And I'm going to finish that. You don't want to use too much glue because you don't want it to squeeze out here. I'm going to keep it clean. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. For a thin, even layer. I'm trying to avoid the joint space that I've created. Go onto it a little bit, not a big deal. 3 board thicknesses away. Check to make sure that that's straight across. Did pretty good there. Finish that. I'm going to cut 3/4 of an inch up here. I want a 3/4 of an inch square all the way around, so I'm going to start here. And go ahead and cut that. And that's 3/4 of an inch away. Going to glue those down. Waste paper back here. Be careful not to lay my work right in the paste that I already have there. So get this waste paper and put it down there. Put that down. Take the bone folder and pull it over. I don't need to worry too much about the joint space, but I'm going to just tuck that in a little bit. But again, I'm not really worried too much about that. And burnish that flat. I'm going to make sure there's no space up there. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. There's no air up there, and burnish that. So far so good. Two board thicknesses away from the edge of the book cloth. I'm going to make a mark and make a mark. That's 2 board thicknesses away. And I'm going to take my bone folder and a ruler, connect those 2 marks that I just made, and make a score. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So 2 board thicknesses away, 2 board thicknesses, mark. That's 3. That's 2 board thicknesses. So from here to here is 2 board thicknesses. Then I'm going to connect those lines. And make another score. Now I have 2 pieces of paste paper that are 6 inches wide by 12 inches long. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one and glue it down right along that score that I made there. And that pencil line there I want to get rid of. Okay. So the way I'm going to do that, there's, several ways of doing that. I'm going to take it and put it on a piece of waste paper, and I'm going to mask off where the groove is that I made, the score mark, and I'm going to glue the board completely. What I want to end up with is a thin, even layer of glue on the board. So I'm working away from that score first, and then I'm gonna, once I have this thin, even layer here, I'm gonna move to the score. And I don't want so much glue that it's gonna squeegee out from under the paper. So a thin, even layer. Make sure that the whole board is still wet with glue before you put the paste paper down, because if any of it's dry, it's not going to stick. So I've got my waste paper. Put this down approximately in the center, right on the score line. Okay, I'm going to flatten that out with my hand and use my bone folder to burnish that flat. If you have a Teflon bone folder here, if you have a regular bone folder, I recommend putting a piece of paper down first and burnishing that till it's completely flat. We'll do the same thing to the other side. Mask that score line. Okay, it's really important to make sure that all the glue is wet when you lay down the paste paper. So I'm just making sure that it's all wet. Thin, even layer. You don't want it to glop. Get rid of my paste paper. And lay this down right along that score. Making sure that the paste paper is aligned here the way that I want it to be. In case you have like a right side up and a right side down. Again, I'm burnishing that. If you're using a regular bone folder, not Teflon, I recommend putting a piece of paper down. Either way. But the Teflon won't cause a shine or tear the paper the way a bone folder might. Make sure you don't drag any of this glue, if there is any, onto the paste paper as well. Now I need a 3/4 of an inch square all the way around. I have this template out of my board thickness template, and I'm just going to mark that all the way around. So 3/4 of an inch square all the way around. And do the same thing here. 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that to that 3/4 inches. Three-fourths inch square all the way around. Another piece of waste paper. So I have a couple choices here. I can do one side and then another side and then another side. So it's really up to you. If you do one side at a time, you should do opposite sides and then the single side. Before you do that, you want to take your one board thickness template, put it at a 45-degree angle at each corner. So, and I'm using my one board thickness template to make a mark that is one board thickness away from the corner of the board. And then I'm going to cut. And I'm going to cut just outside of that line that I made. And it's just going to make it a little bit more than one board thickness. And that will ensure that I don't have any exposed board when I turn this over. Trying to keep the area where I'm working as neat as possible so stuff doesn't get in the way. Now, as I said, you can glue, glue, turn, glue, turn. What I'm going to do for the sake of speeding up the demonstration is to put it down, and I'm going to glue the whole thing rather than one section at a time. So I'm going to glue that side, and this side. Okay, I'm trying to stay as neat as possible. Not use too much. Again, I want a thin, even layer all the way around. And get rid of my waste paper, and I'll go top and bottom. I'm going to take these two corners, and with my thumb or my bone folder, I'm just going to tuck that in like that, and tuck that in like that. And then once I've done that, then I can get this corner done. I'm going to make sure that there's no air between the edge of the board and the paper. So I burnish that way, pull it down, tap those corners a little bit. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Again, I'm careful not to lay my work in the glue that I already have on my waste paper. Do the head and tail, top and the bottom. Pushing that, making sure that that's flat against the top there. Tucking in that corner, tucking in that corner. Getting it flat against there, using my bone folder to flatten against the board and pull that on. Down, and see, I have a nice miter at every corner. I'll burnish all of this just to make sure that it's flat. Adhered. Okay, so nice mitered corners, and this is perfectly spaced here. Paste paper flat on the board. So this is my text block, and it's going to go in like that, and that will be, so I'm getting there.